Hi, so it's been a while since I did a Star Trek video, so let's talk about Star Trek. Specifically, I'm going to talk about the episode Charlie X, which of course was the second broadcast episode of Star Trek, the original series. A while ago, I did a video talking about the first broadcast episode of Star Trek, the original series, The Man Trap. I'll leave a link to that in the description if you want to check that video out. And I figured I wanted to do more Star Trek videos, so I figured let's pick up where we left off with that video and talk about episode 2 of Star Trek, the original series, Charlie X. An absolute classic, one that a lot of people really like, and they should, because it's a really good episode. The first Star Trek episode written by D.C. Fontana, who is a legendary Star Trek writer. Based on a story by series creator Gene Roddenberry. In this episode, we are introduced to Charlie Evans, a young man who has been growing up alone in isolation on the planet Thasus. He was in a shuttle crash as a very small child, and he was the sole survivor of this shuttle crash, and he has been growing up in isolation, teaching himself how to speak and, function and basically just survive alone on this planet for years and years. And now at age 17, he is picked up by a research crew who drop him off at the Enterprise, and the Enterprise are going to transport him to a nearby colony where his closest living relatives are. But of course, this being Star Trek, things are not quite that simple, because for one thing, Charlie has all the kind of usual awkwardness and sort of, stuff like that teenagers have to deal with, all the usual kind of teenage problems. Also, he's been living in isolation, so he doesn't really know how to talk to and communicate with other humans, and also he's got superpowers. So, yeah, this isn't going to go well. This is basically like, that kid from that one episode of The Twilight Zone where it's like, think happy thoughts, or this kid with weird superpowers will mess with you. It's basically that kid as a teenager on the Enterprise. And things take a turn immediately. Like, from the second you meet Charlie, he gives off like unsettling vibes. There's just something off about him. Obviously, he's got all the kind of usual awkwardness that you'd expect from, that most teenagers have, but also there's, again, that added factor of the isolation. But there's just something about him straight away. Even when he's being friendly at the start, there's always just something not quite right, just a little bit off about him. And I really like that in the performance, and in the writing as well, but mostly in the performance. I really like how there's something kind of off about him straight away. And slowly as the episode progresses, we discover, it's that he's got these superpowers and he's not well adjusted to dealing with humans. So that's a bad combination. He immediately gets the hots for Yeoman Rand, and she does not fancy him back. And that goes, again, about as well as you would expect for this awkward, teenager who's grown up in social isolation and has, again, these a lot of superpowers. He's very powerful. These are almost godlike powers he's got. And, he just wreaks some havoc after a while. After we finally get the reveal of his superpowers, he kind of wreaks havoc. I really like the relationship between Charlie and Kirk in this. Those two have a really interesting dynamic, because Charlie right away, he recognizes Kirk's authority and he sort of respects Kirk. He kind of sees Kirk almost as like a father figure, and they talk about that in the episode. He sees him as kind of a father figure. He gets that Kirk is in charge and he respects his authority for the most part for most of the episode. But we slowly see Kirk's attitude towards him change as he realizes what powers he has, and also at the same time Charlie's also kind of realizing what he can do with his powers, and he sort of his attitude towards Kirk and the rest of the crew also starts to change as well. That's a really interesting dynamic, and I think the two actors play off each other really well here in this episode. I like the way that kind of those two characters and their kind of relationship, I like how that develops over the course of the episode. I think it's a really interesting part. One of the strongest points of the episode for me. I also really like how this episode is kind of it's almost a really good starting point for Star Trek, because it kind of gives you all the different tones and vibes that you can expect from Star Trek, the original series, where there are kind of more serious moments and some kind of almost dark and creepy moments and unsettling moments, but there's also just enough of that kind of goofy, wacky cheesiness that you expect from the original series. And I like that they balance those two tones quite well. That can be difficult to balance, the goofy, wacky stuff with the dark, emotional stuff, but they actually do it quite well here. One scene that is particularly fun for me is when Kirk has to basically explain to Charlie why he can't go around just slapping women on the arse whenever he wants. And Kirk has many strengths, right? But having those kinds of discussions with teenage boys is not one of his strengths. He is very, very awkward in that scene. More awkward than Kirk often is, to be fair. So that's quite a. I like that scene. I think that's a good little character scene for those two, as well as being a little bit of kind of played, not necessarily for laughs, but it's a little bit of a lighter scene, I suppose. Even though it's dealing with a serious topic, I think the two actors do play that scene a little bit lighter with the awkwardness of the situation. So I really like that scene. But yeah, like I say, I like how the goofier moments never kind of undermine the serious moments, and the serious moments are allowed to be serious and dark and unsettling at times and kind of creepy at times, especially when Charlie kind of gets full control of his powers and starts to take over the ship. I mean, he always had full control of his power. You know what I mean? When he finally starts to take over the ship, he's got some creepy powers there. One bit that always kind of creeped me out, especially the first time I saw this episode when I was much younger, is when there's some people who are laughing, just some crew members off camera who are laughing. And someone earlier was laughing at Charlie and he made them disappear because he didn't want them laughing at him. And these people aren't even laughing at him. They're just laughing amongst themselves. And he just walks by and goes, "No laughing." And then they stop laughing and you see one of them turn the corner and their face is just gone. He's just made their whole face just disappear. And it's like, oh, that's kind of creepy. That's kind of unsettling. And when you kind of realise how powerful Charlie is, yeah, it becomes kind of creepy and unsettling. And again, that kind of, the fact that he always had that kind of vibe of there being something a little bit off about him anyway, it really makes him quite a creepy character as the story progresses. I mean, like I say, he's kind of creepy at the start, but he gets more and more creepy as it goes on. But something I really like, actually, about the characterization of Charlie is they never kind of make him out to be like a fully evil character. Like some characters in Star Trek and just in, various media are presented as just fully like evil, irredeemable, evil villains. Charlie, he is a threat. He's seen as a threat and a danger, and he needs to be stopped, and they take that very seriously. The crew of the Enterprise take that very seriously, but they never kind of see him as this evil character. They understand the circumstances surrounding him, how he's, how he's at an awkward age and how he's been isolated for all this time. So they never kind of fully treat him as an evil villain. And I kind of like that. I think that's really good. And I think that really works well in the ending. So, spoilers if you've not seen this episode, I guess. I don't know why I'm doing a spoiler alert now, when I've already spoiled a bunch of stuff from this. But if you haven't seen this episode of Star Trek from the 1960s, and you want to watch it without having the ending spoiled for you, go watch it first, I guess. But I really like the ending because there's one element of the ending that I'm not as big a fan of, which is that it's kind of a Deus Ex Machina ending, which I've never been the biggest fan of, but I do think the rest of the ending is strong enough to kind of make up for that element of it. So, towards the end, Charlie, he kind of gets the full grasp of his powers. He kind of goes mad with power. He takes over the Enterprise. The Enterprise at this point don't want to take him to this colony because they're like, well, he can't. This is a relatively controlled environment of other humans. The colony's not going to be as controlled as this, and there's going to be way more people than this, and he's not adjusted to society, so he's going to cause a bunch of chaos if we take him there. So they try to divert course. They try to not take him to the colony, and he overpowers them, takes over the ship, and is basically just going. He's overthrown Kirk as as commander of the Enterprise. He is going to this colony, and Kirk comes up with a plan of, okay, well, he's controlling the ship. Maybe if we turn everything in the ship on, turn on all the lights, all the monitors, everything, he'll get distracted trying to control all of that, and I'll be able to take him down. And it sort of works. It doesn't work exactly as he plans. but it does distract Charlie long enough for a ship that's been following the Enterprise from the planet Thasus to catch up with them and to basically take control away from Charlie. At that point, we get a Thasian who is represented as a big green floating head. He kind of shows up. He goes, "Hi, I'm a Thasian. We are the, Charlie grew up on our planet. We gave him his powers so he could learn to survive. We've been following his ship. We've seen that he's been causing a bunch of chaos. We've put everything back as it was. Like the good Deus Ex Machina ending that we are. Everything has been returned to normal. We're going to just, take Charlie now and we'll look after him." And Charlie just immediately snaps back from being this, from being like a villain to being kind of a scared, awkward, kind of pathetic child again. And I really, really like that. I think that's a really good way of switching the character back, because they've never really made him like a fully evil villain. They've never made him they've always tried to make him somewhat sympathetic in the script. And I think he does come across as sympathetic here. Again, he's a danger, he's a threat, he can't stay on the Enterprise, they have to deal with this. But at the same time, again, because they've never really presented him as a fully evil and unsympathetic character, you do kind of feel a little bit sorry for him when he's going up to Kirk going, "No, I want to stay here. You're my friends. They don't love, not like how you guys love. I want to stay on the Enterprise with you." And Kirk, to his credit, no one would blame Kirk. He went, No, you've been running amok on my ship. You've done a lot of damage. You've upset a lot of people. You're going with the Thasians. Get off of my ship. No one would blame Kirk if he did that. But that's not the kind of character Kirk is. And Kirk says to the Thasian, "Is there some way we can work this out? Surely we can train him. Surely there must be another way." And I love that about Kirk. And, ultimately the Thasian says, "Look, he's going to keep using his powers. We can't stop that happening. No one's going to be able to stop that happening. And it's going to end up with him destroying you or you destroying him. So this is best for everyone." But I like that Kirk accepts this, but I like that Kirk was still willing to teach him, still willing to compromise, still willing to give Charlie a chance. And we end the episode on such a downer note where Charlie is basically begging Kirk to let him stay on the Enterprise as he's, transported away by the Thasians. And then Kirk just says to Yeoman Rand, "It's okay, it's all good now." Yeoman Rand is crying and he says, "It's okay, it's all over now." And then it just ends with them all just kind of sat there, really kind of somber, in a kind of a downer mood. And I really like how much of a downer ending it is, because it's not just, the quick reset of, well, that's that problem dealt with, let's fly off and do another wacky space adventure just in time for next week. It's like, no, everyone's kind of bummed out by the way that happened and the way that kind of went down. And I really, really like that. I think those elements of the ending, the stuff with Charlie's characterization, the way Kirk still wants to help him, and this ultimate kind of down note ending, I think that more than makes up for the Deus Ex Machina aspects of the ending. So I really love this story. I think it is a really strong episode. Just fantastic. For me, this is classic Star Trek at its absolute best. I adore this episode. So good. Let me know your thoughts on it, though, down in the comments, because that's all my thoughts. That's all I've got for you. So, yeah, thanks for watching, and, yeah, that's the video. I don't know how to end these. That's the video. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.